Before streaming existed, before home video dominated, television was the horror factory nobody talks about anymore. Networks churned out, made-for-TV movies that traumatized an entire generation and then vanished into obscurity. Some of these films are so disturbing that modern viewers question how they ever aired in primetime. Ready to unearth the nightmares your parents never warned you about? Number 5. Gargoyles in 1972. Most people have completely forgotten that one of the most impressive creature features ever made wasn't produced by a major studio with a massive budget. It was a humble ABC television movie that aired on a random Tuesday night and proceeded to scar children across America for decades. Gargoyles stands as absolute proof that limitations breed creativity, and sometimes the small screen can deliver bigger scares than anything Hollywood was offering in theaters at the time. The premise sounds almost quaint when you describe it. A paleontologist named Dr. Mercer Bowley travels to the American Southwest with his daughter Diana, researching material for a book about ancient demons and mythological creatures. They stumble upon a roadside attraction run by an eccentric old-timer who claims to possess actual gargoyle remains. Within minutes of their arrival, the old man is dead, and father and daughter find themselves hunted by creatures that shouldn't exist. What elevates this beyond typical monster movie territory is the intelligence behind the Gargoyle Society. These aren't mindless beasts. They're calculating, patient, and have been waiting centuries for their moment to reclaim the Earth from humanity. The creature design work here won an Emmy Award, which tells you everything about the ambition behind this production. Special effects wizard Stan Winston, years before he would revolutionize the industry with Aliens and Terminator, helped create these gargoyles alongside Ellis Berman Jr. The main gargoyle, voiced and performed by Bernie Casey, possesses an unnerving elegance that most movie monsters simply cannot match. His movements are deliberate and graceful rather than lumbering, which somehow makes him infinitely more terrifying. When he speaks, outlining his species' plan for global domination and the eventual extinction of humankind, the philosophical weight of his words hits harder than any jump scare could. Director Bill Norton understood something crucial about effective horror. The anticipation of seeing the monster delivers more dread than the monster itself. For large portions of the runtime, the gargoyles exist as shadows, as sounds in the desert night, as glimpses of wings against moonlight. When the full creatures finally appear in the climactic sequences, the buildup has made them feel genuinely threatening rather than silly. The desert location filming adds tremendous atmosphere, transforming the American Southwest into an alien landscape where anything seems possible and nowhere feels safe. Critics at the time were genuinely surprised by the quality on display. This wasn't supposed to be a prestige project, yet it delivered more creativity than most theatrical releases that year. Audiences who caught the original broadcast remember it vividly even 50 years later, which speaks to the lasting power of practical effects and committed performances. Cornell Wilde brings gravitas to the scientist role, while Jennifer Salt grounds the human terror in something relatable and authentic. The film also tackles fascinating themes about evolution, religious mythology, and the fragility of human dominance on this planet. The gargoyles view humanity as a temporary inconvenience, an evolutionary mistake that will eventually correct itself. This cosmic indifference proves far more disturbing than simple malevolence. They don't hate humans. They simply consider us irrelevant to their eternal plans. That philosophical depth, combined with genuinely impressive creature work, transforms what could have been disposable entertainment into something that resonates across generations. Modern viewers discovering gargoyles for the first time often express disbelief that network television produced something this ambitious and this effectively creepy. The pacing feels patient by contemporary standards, building tension through character development rather than constant action. When violence does erupt, the impact lands harder because you've grown invested in the characters facing extinction. This balance between thoughtful storytelling and monster movie thrills represents everything television horror could achieve when talented people refused to phone in their work, simply because it was destined for the small screen rather than theatrical distribution. Number 4. Crowhaven Farm, 1970. ABC struck absolute gold with this supernatural thriller that combines New England witchcraft, hysteria, with psychological terror in ways that feel genuinely sophisticated, even by modern standards. Crowhaven Farm arrived at the beginning of the decade and immediately established a template that countless television horrors would attempt to replicate throughout the following years. Few ever matched its effectiveness because few understood the delicate balance between gothic atmosphere and genuine emotional stakes. Hope Lang delivers a powerhouse performance as Maggie Porter, a woman who inherits a centuries-old Massachusetts farmhouse under mysterious circumstances. She and her husband Ben relocate from city life, expecting peaceful country existence, but quickly discover that the property carries terrible secrets that stretch back to the Salem witch trial era. What begins as standard supernatural setup evolves into something far more unsettling, as Maggie experiences visions of a past life where she may have betrayed fellow accused witches to save herself from execution. The reincarnation angle gives this film psychological complexity that elevates it beyond typical haunted house fare. Maggie isn't simply being terrorized by external forces. She's confronting the possibility that she herself committed unforgivable sins in a previous existence and now must face consequences that have waited 300 years for payment. This internal conflict makes every supernatural occurrence land with greater emotional weight because the horror isn't purely external. It emerges from within the protagonist herself, from guilt she doesn't consciously remember, but cannot escape regardless. Director Walter Grauman orchestrates tension masterfully, allowing the creeping dread to build through accumulating details rather than obvious scares. The locals in town behave strangely around Maggie. The farmhouse itself seems to possess hostile intentions. Nightmares bleed into waking life until Maggie and the audience can no longer distinguish memory from vision from present reality. This disorientation serves the themes beautifully because the question of personal responsibility across lifetimes requires exactly this kind of fractured perception. The supporting cast adds layers of menace, particularly the seemingly friendly neighbors whose interest in Maggie feels increasingly predatory as the film progresses. Paul Burke brings complexity to the husband role, portraying a man who loves his wife but cannot accept the supernatural experiences she describes. His skepticism isolates Maggie further, leaving her alone against forces that everyone else either dismisses or secretly serves. Production design creates authentic colonial atmosphere without resorting to obvious period piece cliches. The farmhouse feels genuinely old, genuinely haunted by history, rather than simply decorated to appear spooky. Cinematographer Fleet Southcott captures the harsh beauty of New England autumn in ways that enhance the film's themes about death, decay, and the impossibility of escaping the past. The climactic sequences venture into territory that shocked network television audiences in 1970. Without revealing specific details, the ending refuses the comfortable resolution that viewers might expect from primetime programming. Justice arrives, but it carries a terrible cost that transforms everything preceding it into something far more tragic than standard horror entertainment typically allows. Critics who revisit the film today frequently cite this uncompromising conclusion as the element that sears Crowhaven Farm into memory long after viewing. This film also benefits from cultural timing. American interest in witchcraft, reincarnation, and alternative spirituality was exploding during this period, giving the supernatural elements contemporary resonance they might have lacked in earlier decades. Audiences weren't simply watching a ghost story. They were engaging with ideas that felt genuinely relevant to the spiritual questioning many people were experiencing at that historical moment. This cultural connection, combined with superior craftsmanship across every department, explains why Crowhaven Farm remains required viewing for anyone interested in the golden age of television horror. Number 3. Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, 1973. Here it is, the film that countless horror fans cite as their original childhood trauma, the movie that ABC aired during family viewing hours and proceeded to terrify an entire generation so thoroughly that many couldn't sleep properly for years afterward. Don't Be Afraid of the Dark contains a premise so simple and so primal that it bypasses intellectual defenses entirely and targets something primitive in the human psyche. Kim Darby plays Sally Farnsworth, a young wife who inherits a Victorian mansion from her grandmother. She and her workaholic husband Alex move into the property despite its obvious need for renovation. During exploration, Sally discovers a bricked-up fireplace in the basement and inexplicably feels compelled to open it against the warnings of an elderly handyman who seems to know terrible secrets about the house. What emerges from that darkness will haunt your nightmares regardless of your age or horror experience level. The creatures themselves are small, wizened, humanoid beings that whisper Sally's name from shadowy corners and gradually become bolder in their torment. Their design walks a perfect line between childlike and demonic, familiar and utterly alien. They could almost be dismissed as harmless if not for the malevolent intelligence behind their actions and the escalating nature of their campaign against Sally's sanity. Every whispered repetition of her name carries implicit threat, promise, and hunger that transcends their diminutive physical presence. What makes this film absolutely devastating is the isolation the protagonist experiences. Her husband dismisses her increasingly frantic reports as stress or imagination. Friends and coworkers politely suggest she might benefit from professional help. The handyman who could validate her experience has his own reasons for staying silent. Sally finds herself utterly alone against forces that only she can perceive, a scenario that taps into universal fears about being disbelieved when facing genuine danger. Director John Newland understood that restraint amplifies horror far more effectively than excess. The creatures appear in glimpses, in shadows, in peripheral vision moments that leave viewers questioning what they actually witnessed. The lighting design throughout uses darkness as both threat and sanctuary in ways that keep audiences perpetually off balance. Nowhere feels truly safe because the creatures exist in the spaces between illumination, in the corners where light cannot reach. In the moments when attention wavers even slightly, the whispers themselves deserve special recognition. Sound design in this film creates an audio landscape of perpetual unease. The creatures don't shout or roar. They murmur seductively, calling Sally toward the darkness they inhabit with voices that sound almost friendly if you don't listen carefully to what they're actually saying. This intimacy with evil proves more disturbing than aggressive antagonism because it suggests a relationship the creatures already assume exists, a bond Sally cannot deny regardless of her desperate attempts to escape. Production circumstances add fascinating context. This was essentially a B-movie produced on television budget with television schedule constraints, yet it achieves atmosphere and effectiveness that many theatrical productions with far greater resources cannot match. The Victorian mansion location provides gothic grandeur, while the intimate scope keeps focus tight on psychological horror rather than spectacle. Remake attempts have tried to recapture what made the original so effective, most notably Guillermo del Toro's 2011 theatrical version. While that film has considerable merit, it cannot replicate the specific alchemy that made the 1973 version so impactful. The original's simplicity, its refusal to over-explain its mythology or expand its scope beyond a one-woman's nightmare, gives it purity that bigger-budget interpretations inevitably dilute. Ask anyone over 50 what television movie scared them most as a child, and Don't Be Afraid of the Dark will appear near the top of virtually every list. That lasting trauma, that permanent residence in collective nightmare memory, testifies to the extraordinary power this modest production achieved through craft, restraint, and understanding of what truly terrifies people at their most vulnerable. Number 2. Bad Ronald, 1974. Here's a premise so disturbing, so psychologically uncomfortable, that you'll find yourself thinking about it for days after viewing. Bad Ronald takes the familiar concept of the stranger hiding in your home and twists it into something that examines loneliness, obsession, and the terrifying elasticity of human psychology under extended isolation. This isn't supernatural horror. This is something far more unnerving because every element remains horrifyingly plausible. Scott Jacoby delivers a career-defining performance as Ronald Wilby, an awkward teenage boy living alone with his overprotective mother in a large old house. After accidentally causing the death of a neighborhood girl who mocked him, Ronald's mother conceals the crime by literally walling her son into a hidden room within their home. The plan involves waiting until public interest in the missing girl subsides, then helping Ronald escape to start a new life elsewhere. Fate intervenes when the mother dies suddenly during routine surgery, leaving Ronald trapped in his concealed space with no one aware he exists. A new family purchases the house without any knowledge that someone already lives within its walls. 3 teenage daughters move in alongside their parents, and Ronald watches through peepholes and hidden passages as his isolation transforms into something far more dangerous than anyone outside his secret room could imagine. What makes this film genuinely disturbing is the patience with which it documents Ronald's psychological deterioration. The teenager creates an elaborate fantasy kingdom called Dorelma, populates it with imaginary characters, and gradually loses the ability to distinguish his invented mythology from reality. His observations of the family, particularly the daughters, shift from curiosity to fixation in ways that generate tremendous unease without ever becoming explicit. Director Buzz Kulik trusts his audience to understand the implications without stating them directly, which somehow makes everything more uncomfortable than graphic content ever could. The technical execution deserves recognition for creating claustrophobic atmosphere within the hidden room while maintaining visual interest across the runtime. We spend significant time in Ronald's confined space, and the production design makes that space feel increasingly smaller as his mental state contracts. The walls that initially protected him from legal consequences become the walls of a prison that destroys everything he might have become under different circumstances. Kim Hunter brings complexity to the mother role in the early scenes, portraying a woman whose love for her son has curdled into something pathological. Her decision to hide him rather than face consequences sets every subsequent tragedy into motion, making her complicit in ways that complicate simple victim and villain dynamics. When she dies, leaving Ronald alone with his deteriorating mind, the tragedy encompasses her, as well as the families affected by Ronald's eventual emergence from hiding. The new family occupying the house remains believably oblivious to the danger within their walls. Small noises get attributed to the old house settling. Missing items get blamed on forgetfulness or sibling disputes. This mundane dismissal of warning signs parallels how real families often rationalize away evidence of threats they cannot psychologically accept. The normalcy of their lives contrasts sharply with the abnormal existence occurring feet away, separated only by plaster and secrets. Contemporary viewers approaching Bad Ronald for the first time frequently express amazement that network television produced something this psychologically mature and this genuinely unsettling. The film refuses easy categorization as horror, thriller, or drama because it contains elements of all 3 genres blended into something unique. Its influence can be detected in subsequent films about hidden intruders, though few have matched the original's commitment to exploring the interior life of its disturbed protagonist, rather than simply treating him as a boogeyman. This is essential viewing for anyone who thinks they've seen everything television horror can offer. Bad Ronald demonstrates that the most terrifying monsters require no makeup or special effects, because they look exactly like troubled young men nobody paid sufficient attention to before catastrophe became inevitable. Number 1. Trilogy of Terror, 1975. This is the one. The television movie that traumatized more people than any other production in the entire decade, that launched 1,000 nightmares, that features an image so iconic that people who never watched the film recognize it immediately. Trilogy of Terror showcases Karen Black in one of the most demanding performances any actor has ever delivered for the small screen, playing 4 distinct roles across 3 separate horror segments that escalate in intensity until the finale destroys any sense of safety viewers might still possess. The anthology format allows the film to explore different varieties of terror rather than committing to a single approach. Director Dan Curtis, who had previously created Dark Shadows and would go on to helm the 1979 Salem's Lot adaptation, understood that variety maintains audience engagement, while the connecting element of Karen Black's presence provides continuity across the diverse stories. The first segment, Julie, presents a seemingly timid English teacher whose student becomes obsessed with her. What begins as standard stalker territory takes a shocking twist that reveals nothing is quite what it appears, and that predators don't always look how we expect them to look. Black's performance here relies on subtle shifts in expression that completely transform character interpretation once the truth emerges. Revisiting this segment after knowing its secrets reveals layers of performance invisible on initial viewing. The second segment, Millicent and Therese, explores the relationship between twin sisters with vastly different personalities. One is repressed and religious, while the other is rebellious and sensual. Their conflict escalates toward violence in ways that incorporate supernatural elements alongside psychological complexity. Again, Black plays both roles, differentiating them through posture, voice, and movement in ways that make viewers forget a single actor inhabits both characters. The segment's resolution provides genuinely chilling implications about identity and internal division. Then comes Amelia. This third segment has achieved legendary status in horror history for extremely good reason. Karen Black plays a young woman who purchases a Zuni fetish doll as a gift for her boyfriend. The doll is bound with a gold chain that supposedly contains the spirit of a hunter named He Who Kills. When the chain accidentally falls off, the doll comes to life and proceeds to hunt Amelia through her apartment in a relentless assault that occupies nearly the entire segment's runtime. Nothing in television horror before or since has matched the intensity of Amelia's confrontation with the Zuni doll. The creature is perhaps 12 inches tall, yet director Curtis and performer Black create genuine terror through commitment to the scenario's internal logic. The doll moves with frightening speed and attacks with savage persistence. Amelia's attempts to destroy or contain it fail repeatedly as the creature demonstrates intelligence and adaptability that overcome her advantages in size and resources. The practical effects work deserves eternal recognition. The doll was operated through a combination of puppet techniques that create movement somehow more unnerving than any computer-generated imagery could achieve. Its carved face, with exaggerated features and bristling hair, expresses murderous intent that reads clearly even without articulation. The teeth, constantly visible in its permanent grimace, become increasingly terrifying as the segment progresses and Amelia's wounds multiply. Karen Black performed much of the physical confrontation herself, throwing herself around the set as she fought an opponent that existed only as prop and puppeteer. The exhaustion and terror visible in her performance wasn't entirely acting because the production demands were genuinely grueling. This commitment to authenticity translates directly to screen, creating visceral impact that safe, comfortable filmmaking simply cannot achieve. The segment's conclusion refuses comfortable resolution. Without revealing specific details, the ending transforms everything preceding it into something far more hopeless than audiences might anticipate from commercial television. The final image has been burned into collective cultural memory as one of the most disturbing moments ever broadcast into American living rooms. Trilogy of Terror demonstrates everything that made 1970s television horror special. Talented creators working with limited resources found creative solutions that emphasized performance, atmosphere, and psychological depth over expensive spectacle. Karen Black's work here represents a masterclass in acting craft, particularly her ability to create completely distinct characters while maintaining the vulnerability and humanity that allows audiences to invest emotionally in their fates. This film must be seen to be believed. It must be experienced alone, late at night, with the lights off and the volume high. Only then can modern viewers begin to understand why an entire generation still checks beneath their furniture before settling in for the evening. The Zuni doll is waiting. It's always waiting, and He Who Kills has very, very patient. Those 5 films represent just a fraction of the incredible horror content network television produced during the 1970s. They've been largely forgotten by mainstream culture, overshadowed by theatrical releases and modern streaming content, yet they retain power to disturb viewers decades after their original broadcast. Which of these have you seen? Which one terrified you most? Drop your memories in the comments and tell me what other forgotten TV movies deserve recognition. Here's my challenge to you. Were these films too scary for network television? Or have we become too soft, too protected, too coddled by content warnings and trigger alerts to handle genuine horror anymore?